italki didn't fail me. The way everyone told me to use it did. italki is one of the most recommended tools in language learning. You book a tutor, you have conversations, you practice, and eventually you're supposed to get fluent. That's the story. But after rethinking my own italki routine through the lens of learning science, things like retrieval practice, cognitive load, and how input actually becomes usable language, I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was doing what everyone tells you to do, and it still wasn't optimal. In this video, I'm breaking down what I used to do on italki, why it felt productive but often wasn't, and how I've changed the way I use it to get more actual learning per lesson. If you use italki or you're thinking about starting, this will probably change how you approach your next session. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Taylor Jones. I've got a PhD in linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania, and on the channel, I discuss everything related to language, linguistics, language learning, and culture. If you're into those topics, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. This is Language Jones. So listen, I love italki. They were the first company to sponsor the channel, and I really felt like I was getting one over on them because I had been paying them, and then they offered to pay me and give me credits for free lessons, so that's living the dream. Anyway, now's as good a time as any to mention the obvious. They sponsored this video. But I was going to make this video anyway because talking with a tutor is hugely important in language learning. Speaking with a coach or a tutor is especially beneficial because it creates focused, responsive interaction that self-study tools can't really provide. You get real-time feedback, tailored input, and opportunities to notice gaps between what you think you can say and what you can actually produce. It's happening in real time, which can be unforgiving. But a good tutor can adjust difficulty on the fly. They can push you to retrieve language instead of just recognizing it. They can help you make sense of patterns you've just been exposed to, but haven't fully internalized yet. Just as importantly, coached conversation can lower uncertainty and cognitive overload by giving structure to speaking practice, making it easier for learners to turn passive knowledge into active, usable language, provided those conversations are designed intentionally rather than treated as aimless chat. More on that in a moment. So, for language coaches and tutors, I use italki. If you're not familiar with them, italki is an online language learning platform that connects learners with human language tutors and coaches from around the world for one-on-one lessons. Instead of pre-recorded courses or automated exercises, italki lets you book live video sessions for real-life conversations tailored to your goals, whether that's conversation practice, exam prep, pronunciation, grammar support, or guided immersion or whatever. And lessons are typically paid per session, giving learners flexibility in schedule, price, and teaching style. You can focus on your specific level, needs, and interests. At its core, italki functions as a marketplace for personalized, interactive language practice that's hard to replicate with apps alone. They have over 150 languages, and they've optimized matching tutors to your schedule. So you don't have to use italki, but they're what I use. And if you choose to, I've got a code for you that gets you $5 when you buy $10. So if you feel like trying italki, use the code Jones01. That's Jones01. But also, and this is weirdly the point of the video, don't use italki how I did. I know that sounds completely silly, but let me explain. I would book lessons whenever I could fit it into my schedule, and that's totally fine and not at all an issue. I'm not going to say that you need to pick a tutor and stick with them or book regular lessons every week or anything. I don't actually think that's necessary. But what I would do is go off and study something, like using my textbook to Anki pipeline, and I'd study for a while, and then I'd go talk to whoever I liked or whoever fit my schedule. And I'd just talk for like an hour and get super burnt out. The tutors were amazing, and they gave me tons of corrections and tons of new vocabulary and corrected phrasing in the chat. But that's basically all I would do. I saw what gaps I had. I benefited from the weird neuroscience thing where talking to a real person just locks everything in better and faster than studying or talking to AI or watching TV. And I'd go off and study for a while and come back and do it again. And that's what a lot of people do. And that doesn't work, at least not optimally. Quick pause, because if you're thinking, yeah, but talking is how you learn to speak, you're not wrong. You're just missing one critical step. Right now, think about your last italki lesson, assuming you had one. How much of it can you actually produce without your tutor in front of you? If the answer is not much, that's actually not a motivation problem. It's not your fault. That's a design problem. And once you fix that, how we design and schedule our time, italki suddenly starts working very differently. First thing I'm doing now, and I wish I'd started sooner, is to optimize how I approach using italki as part of my learning routine based on best practices from learning science. To optimize learning and retention in one-on-one lessons with a speaker of your target language, the key is to design the session around how memory and skill acquisition actually work, not around what merely feels productive. Start by prioritizing retrieval over exposure. Instead of spending most of your lesson listening or reacting, structure it so you're regularly forced to produce language from memory, retelling a short story, summarizing an article you read beforehand, or answering predictable questions without notes. Retrieval strengthens memory far more than rehearing explanations, and a tutor can immediately help you refine what comes out. And you can listen on your own time using podcasts, audiobooks, and other media, so you still get that listening practice. You can take control of the lesson. Basically, every tutor I've ever talked to always has a backup plan or some organized content they can teach, but they're happy to work with you on whatever you want. You just have to know what you want. So here's some approaches you might consider. One approach is the frequency approach. What are common words and structures? There's different forms this could take. You could take the frequency dictionary approach of just trying to work on the most common vocabulary, no matter the type. But you could also say, I'll need to be able to conjugate the top few hundred verbs. So drilling irregulars, for instance, in conversation is a great use of your time. A different approach is the thematic approach. What are the common or likely scenarios for your language use? Can you navigate all the vocabulary and sentence structures you need, as well as the schema, that's like the scripts we use when more or less on autopilot, in situations like taking a cab or ordering at a cafe? I have a family member who can say, I'd like a coffee. Can I have one of those to eat? And I'm allergic to hazelnuts in like 10 languages now, even though they can't say much else. This is your phrasebook knowledge of a language, which I think a lot of people really undervalue. And that brings me to another approach, choosing a specific resource, like a phrasebook or a textbook, and working through a specific part with your teacher. An easy way to start is to say something like, for instance, I'm using the Routledge Colloquial for, say, Persian, and the chapter I just studied taught me all these words for clothes. What am I missing? How do people talk about these things in real life? A final approach in this by no means exhaustive list is just to take whatever real-world content you're using and say, for instance, I'm reading this book on this topic. What are some ways people talk about this? Returning to the bigger picture of learning science, a second point is to keep the cognitive load manageable. I know I've said it a few times in this video. Cognitive load is just a fancy way of saying how much mental energy it takes. Don't burn out. Free-flowing conversation can overwhelm learners, especially below advanced levels, because you're juggling meaning, grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation all at once. So narrow the scope of each lesson, one situation, one grammatical pattern, or one communicative function. This makes errors more noticeable and corrections more likely to stick. And, maybe even more importantly, you might want to prioritize shorter sessions. You'll know what's right for you, but I've been finding lately that a 30-minute session lets me get a lot done and still feel like I can do more or do other things with the rest of my day. Third, use feedback strategically, not constantly. Immediate correction is useful for pronunciation and fossilized errors, which are the absolute worst, but too much interruption can block fluency and retention. If you've ever had an overenthusiastic language partner who really wants to help you improve, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's well-intentioned, but it can be demoralizing. So an easy fix is to agree in advance on what should be corrected, live, versus noted and reviewed afterwards. This allows you to maintain flow while still benefiting from expert input. Get targeted feedback and use a scalpel with focused precision, not a scorched earth policy, to egregiously mix metaphors. And really importantly, make sure you get your corrections in a way you can learn from later. That means taking notes, or even better, having your teacher write in the chat. Fourth, build in repetition, but with variation. This is doing some of the initial encoding work for memory while you can simultaneously benefit from the neurological boost of social interaction with a human. Revisit the same structures or situations multiple times across lessons, but change the context slightly each time. This spaced, varied practice improves long-term retention and transfer, compared to covering something once and moving on. Finally, connect lessons to pre- and post-lesson work. This is where I really failed before. Before the session, prepare a small set of words, ideas, or questions you'll need to use or you want to explore. Italki actually has suggested prompts you can explore if you're drawing a blank here. Have your lesson, and then afterward briefly reflect, or write down what you struggled to say, then practice retrieving those forms again later. Ideally, you'd organize, elaborate on, and memorize the new material. So you could use an LLM to organize or expand on the material you extracted from your lesson. For instance, provide 3 sample sentences using this grammatical construction, or what are some additional vocabulary items related to X topic. I'm going to have a whole video on this soon, so stay tuned. I recommend then dumping all the things you want to actually retain into your spaced repetition practice. If you don't have one, check out my video on my textbook to Anki pipeline. It's the chat to Anki pipeline now. They're the same pipeline. Although, pro tip, concatenate your spreadsheets so you have a master vocab file you can search through so you don't keep adding the same words by accident. Ask me how I know. Anyway, doing all this, the italki lesson becomes a high-value testing and feedback event inside a larger learning loop rather than a one-off where you learn how to talk about poop or whatever. And then in the next lesson, set aside 5 minutes or so to review what was done in the last, if you need it. To summarize everything I just said, one-on-one lessons work best when they're intentional speaking laboratories, workshops, designed to trigger retrieval, manage load, and deliver targeted feedback and reinforce learning over time, rather than just unstructured conversations that only feel like progress. All of this means boosting the effectiveness of an already incredibly effective approach to language learning by making it targeted, learning where you benefit from human interaction and human knowledge in short enough sessions you don't burn out, and with a strategy for using the lessons to identify, target, and eliminate gaps in your knowledge, with a built-in plan for how to actually memorize and retain the new material. And don't get me wrong, if you want to just sign in and shoot the shit with a friend on the other side of the world, more power to you. I actually think that that's an important thing to leave time for, even if you do take all of my advice here. Human interaction in another language is nourishing for the soul. But if we're talking optimization so you can get to that advanced level where you can have a more meaningful conversation, this is what I'm trying to build in now and what I'm seeing tremendous benefits from. Let me know if you think I missed anything. I've got some really big things in the works, including a guide to LLM-assisted self-study and later this year, an introductory course in linguistics, so stay tuned. If you like what I'm doing with the channel, you can always support it here on YouTube with super thanks or super chat, or over on Patreon at patreon.com/languagejones. Patrons will have early notice about all the cool things in the works. Please leave a comment, they're great for the algorithm, and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, happy learning.